Number 5 on this list is Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. You may be familiar with this title because there was actually a movie adaptation that hit the screen super recently. Back in 2019, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark came out in film format. But this movie was based off of a book, and for the longest time, this book was super banned. SCMP says this one stands out on the list because unlike the other banned or challenged books, Scary Stories is not political and it doesn't contain any references to drugs or sex. So why were these collections of horror stories so controversial? Some of the stories could be pretty scary and parents felt that they were inappropriate for their children, which is fair considering these are stories about being buried alive, cannibalism, and way more. But for many people, the real issue was the artwork by Stephen Gamble, an incredibly talented illustrator who no doubt caused nightmares for thousands of children since the book's first publication in 1981. So literally, guys, this book got banned because it was too scary. Think about that for a second. The author literally did too good of a job at making a horror book that people thought no one should read it. If I was the guy who wrote this, then I wouldn't know whether to take that as a compliment or like a criticism, to be honest. The people who banned this thing couldn't hold it down forever though, because at the end of the day, it is some great literature for those who love horror. Number 4 on this list is Fire and Fury. Now, this one I felt like I had to bring up because it happened really recently with the former president of the United States. Skyscape says Wolf's gossipy tell-all describes a dysfunctional presidency perpetually in chaos, zoning in at one point on the day the FBI director James Comey was fired. Comey heard about it on TV. Not all of Wolf's claims are accepted as truth, of course. Trump said he didn't authorize Wolf's White House access and didn't speak to him for the first book. Trump's lawyer Charles Harder sent a cease and desist letter threatening a libel lawsuit in an effort to stop publication. Fire and Fury sold out in its first day of a release as a result. By 2021, Trump was speaking to Wolf for Landslide, Wolf's third book in the trilogy. There were countless scandals during the Trump administration, so I feel like this one was just another notch on the belt. Either way though, the government literally did everything in their power to try and get rid of it and stop us from being able to buy it. The opposite happened though, and because it got so much attention, it flew off the shelves faster than they could print them. Number 3 on this list is Lawn Boy. This story, written by Jonathan Iveson, is one of the most challenged books in America in 2021, and honestly, folks, it really shouldn't be. Esquire says Lawn Boy is the big-hearted story of Mike Munoz, a young Chicano striver working on a landscaping crew in Washington. As Mike fights against the soul-crushing forces of classism and racism to achieve his American dream, he also comes to terms with his sexual identity. Though the novel was written for an adult audience, teens fell in love with Lawn Boy, leading it to be awarded an Alex Prize, an award bestowed by the Young Adult Library Services Association to books written for adults that resonate with teens. Critics slammed the book for the LGBTQ content and sexually explicit material, pointing to a sexual encounter between two young men. Iveson has received hate mail and death threats as a result of campaigns to ban his book, but he remains uncode. When I look at the wealth of great literature that enlightened souls have sought to ban through the ages, how could I feel anything but pride to be listed among them, he wrote. To those who would ban my book and burn me at the stake because they are ashamed of their own past experiences or uncomfortable with any non-binary sexual identifications, I hope you find healing. And literally, guys, shout out Jonathan on that one. When I found out that this book was something that people were trying to ban in literally 2021, it kind of blew my mind. Like, sometimes I think that the world is past stuff like that, and I do want to say that I think most people are. Like in America, 87% of people don't think that books should get banned. So at the very least, regardless of their views on things, they think that there should be a freedom of speech or writing. Either way, the government hasn't actually forbidden you from reading this book. People tried to do that. And I say, you shouldn't listen to them. Number 2 on this list is Animal Farm. So if you wanted to read Animal Farm now, then you probably wouldn't have too hard of a time getting your hands on a copy. But back in the day, this wasn't always the case. In fact, the government for a long time wanted nothing to do with the book. Spyscape says Animal Farm was a target of censors and spies. The satire revolves around farm animals who rebel, hoping to create an equal society. Instead, they end up living under Napoleon, a dictatorial pig. The USSR saw it as a critique of its politics and banned the book. The UAE briefly banned Animal Farm because of its talking pigs seen to be against Islamic values. The CIA, meanwhile, turned it into a propaganda tool and funded an animated movie of the same name, although spies changed the book's ending. If we think about it logically for a second, it makes sense why a government wouldn't want Animal Farm to get read by the general public. This is especially heightened when we think about it from the perspective of a controlling government like the USSR was. In their brain, they probably saw this book as a bit of a threat. The public reads it and then starts getting some sneaky ideas about how they're gonna revolt and start their own new country with a totally new government. And then this even goes a step further because the CIA started pushing this book and marketing it as something against the USSR. What was a fictional story turned into this whole political thing caught between the two biggest superpowers in the world when it was released. And number 1 on this list is The Anarchist Cookbook. This book has had a roller coaster of a life since it was written. Big Think says, since it was first written in 1971, much of its information is out of date. But some topics, like how to make improvised bombs, don't have an expiration date. The book provides instructions for making LSD and tear gas, primers on how to operate various firearms, how to sabotage different kinds of infrastructure, and writing on anarchist philosophy. The book was written by William Powell, a manager of a bookstore in Greenwich Village. Powell quit his job, however, to write the Anarchist Cookbook. My motivation at the time was simple, said Powell in an article for The Guardian. I was being actively pursued by the US military, who seemed single-mindedly determined to send me to fight and possibly die in Vietnam. Its countercultural, violent message proved popular today. It is sold in excess of 2 million copies. It should come as no surprise that the book is infamous and controversial, but the kinds of criticism it attracts varies depending on the source. Governments across the world clearly have a negative opinion of the book. It does, after all, advocate for violent civil disobedience. The Anarchist Cookbook is banned in Australia. In the UK, possessing the book, though not illegal itself, has often been used as evidence in terrorism cases. A teenager was accused of and later acquitted of a plot to assassinate British National Party members in 2008. In 2017, a 27-year-old who had traveled to Syria and possessed a copy was accused of being a terrorist. It turned out that he had merely printed a copy of the Anarchist Cookbook for use in a role-playing game in a university society. So clearly the government does not like this book at all. I think it's a bit much for people to be accused of certain things just by owning the book, but I also kind of see why it happens based on the contents of the text. Just be aware that if you pick this book up, then the government may start keeping tabs on you.
Number 5. The Book of the Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage. The Book of Abramelin, or more formally, the Book of the Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage, is a Jewish magic text that is thought to date back at some point in the 14th or 15th century. Now, it wasn't this initial publication that gave it such a notoriety. There wasn't really a lot of book reviewing going on back then. It was when it was upheld by the 19th and 20th century magicians who made up the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which kind of sounds like a fake bad guy from an RPG, but is a British secret society dedicated to the practice, research, and upholding of old occult magic ways. Can't be that secret though, because I'm talking about it. One of the founders of the Golden Dawn, one SLM Matters, created the first ever English translation of the book in the 1890s, drawing from a 17th century French translation. Mathers' translation became the definite magic text of the 19th century, eventually helping inspire Aleister Crowley, the legendary legendary occultist and fixture of one of the best Ozzy Osbourne songs ever. There's all kinds of spells and magic inside the text. Some highlights include spells on how to conjure someone into a donkey, summon a monkey to do your bidding, how to bring forth spirits to fetch you goods. The key point in the text, however, is an epic multi-month ritual that, if performed correctly, will allow the sorcerer to commune with their guardian angel other half. The book posits that everyone's guardian angel is another part of their essence, a spiritual other. The ritual involves, I don't really know how to say this politely. You have to get blissfully intimate with the angel, and once this honeymoon period is over, the caster then has to summon up and conquer unredeemed spirits of the infernal regions of hell to conquer them, and then will be able to be master of the spirit domain. That all sounds pretty complicated though, honestly, so all things considered, maybe it's for the best that this one's locked away. I don't really need to mess with magic, that's above my pay grade, and I'm not looking to get too intimate with my significant other guardian angel anytime soon. Number 4, the Codex Gigas. When it comes to cursed and demonic books, the Codex Gigas is one of the biggest ones around. Like, literally. Codex Gigas translates to giant book, which isn't a very scary name, but when you see the size of this behemoth, it starts to make a bit more sense. The thing is massive, 2 feet long. While giant oversized illuminated manuscripts were fairly common around this era, this one stood out for its immense size and also the impressively scary rumors surrounding the cursed text. It's occasionally been dubbed Satan's Bible due to the interesting legend behind its origin. Now, supposedly the story goes that a monk by the name of Herman the Recluse, which same, honestly. Anyway, Herman was condemned to death for heresy and was to be walled up alive and starved. In a desperate plea to save himself, Herman tried to convince the prior and the abbot that if he could pen a manuscript to honor God's glory and contained all of human knowledge and history in one night, that he could be let free. The abbot agreed, thinking that this was, of course, an impossible task. Well, he didn't know that Herman was the John Wick of penmanship, who wrote until midnight, wearing his fingertips down, and in a moment of desperation, made a prayer to Lucifer, and asked for his eternal soul in exchange for the book's completion in order to repent for his heresy. I totally get it, you know? I've done some pretty crazy things trying to write my scripts in time for a deadline too. I sold my soul earlier this week to get top 5 UFOs in on time. I get it. Now, not poking any holes in your logic here though, Herman, but I will say maybe selling your soul to the devil is part of the reason you got into this mess, because that actually sounds a ton like heresy. A variation of the legend states that Herman worked for years on the manuscript, day and night, but still asked for the devil's assistance anyway, the lazy bastard. Anyway, the legend states that Satan signed the Bible with an illustration of himself. The ego on that guy. The book contains a birth of information. Like they said, it was supposed to be everything humanity had attained up to that point. Now, these days, the Codex Gigas is preserved in the Natural Museum in Sweden, where you can admire the line work of Herman the Recluse and his ghost author, Satan. Number 3, the Grand Grimoire. Our next entry has been formally referred to as the Gospel of Satan. It's different from Satan's Bible, and is said to be a cursed book whose knowledge had to be sealed away to protect humanity. So this might be the most dangerous book ever published after Hop on Pop. The Grand Grimoire was said to have been penned by a priest in the 16th century who was possessed by a litany of demons who compelled the man to put their knowledge to paper. Acting as a scribe for the demons, the man wrote everything they knew about dark incantations, spells, instructions on how to cast rituals, how to bind a demon to make it do your bidding. Wait, a demon wrote this book? A demon gave instructions about how it wants to be bound to a human and serve humans? That's a freaky little demon. That's not all though. There's a step-by-step recipe for a little necromancy if you're down to dabble in some dark arts and make some bones dance to your rhythm. The book really covers all the fun stuff you've been told not to do. Now, it's not all brimstone and hellfire too. There's rituals on how to manipulate your luck, how to conduct a seance, and I think this is adorable, but there's even ways to make people love you in the book. Now, a little dating tip from your friends at Top 5 Scary, I will say, if you need a demon's help to make them like you, that might not be the most successful relationship, but you do you, don't let me get in the way. Now, if all of this is sounding pretty appealing, and I don't blame you, because it all does sound really cool, just know that the book is considered high treason. Even so much as cracking the spine is considered equivalent to selling your soul, so maybe hold off on that Amazon order for a bit. Besides, because of the book's cursed reputation, the original copy is said to be locked away in the Vatican's famous secret archives, and no matter how many times you ask, they're not going to let you look at it, even if you say you just want to take a quick little peek at the illustrations. I know, so unfair. Ugh, I don't even have any late fees. Let me take the book out. Number 2, the untitled grimoires. You think a book with a name is scary? Imagine a book without a name. Coming up next on our list of haunted nighttime reading is the untitled grimoires. It was so scary they couldn't even deign to give it a name. The books are said to originate from a Wiccan high priestess named Persephone Adarasta Irene, who has one of the coolest names I've ever heard. She recorded a book of her family's spiritual history. These manuscripts record Persephone's Wiccan history that she reworked all through her adult life. The first book contains around 250 pages of spells, incantations, curses, enchantments, and some information on gems, planets, rites, potions, and exorcisms. Basically anything and everything that a fledgling sorceress or warlock could ever possibly want. The second book is a little more light, the sequel's a bit of a letdown. It's just alchemy, chemistry, cures, perfumes, and tonics. Now, the first book is believed to be the one to carry the curse, as Persephone's spells are believed in Wiccan culture to contain more power than most other records due to her embodiment of her own soul inside the book. They say all authors put a bit of soul in their work, and it seems as if the Wiccan high priestess took that a bit more literally than most of us do. These books would eventually find their way into the possession of one Alice Montserrat, a close working associate of Aleister Crowley, who you know from earlier in the video as one of the most famous practicers of the occult and lover of white horses. Montserrat left an inscription in the first page of the book, warning to all of those who open it, "To those not of the craft, the reading of this book is forbidden. Proceed no further, or justice will exact a swift and terrible retribution, and you will surely suffer at the hands of the craft." This was written in several languages to make sure it came across to just about anybody who opened the book. Now, I'm kind of unclear on that. I don't know, some of the old words, the old English is kind of confusing me. Does that mean the book should be read like it's good? I don't know. Not really getting that. And finally, coming in at her number 1 spot today on demonic dictionaries and evil literature is the infamous Lesser Key of Solomon. Make no mistake from the title, even though it's a Lesser Key of Solomon, it is not a lesser evil. It's an anonymously authored grimoire on demonology, so not written by Solomon. It's also known as Clavicula Salomonis Regis, or Lemegeton, is a grimoire. It's a book of magic that gained significant prominence in occult literature. Now, the grimoire is attributed to King Solomon, the biblical figure renowned for his wisdom and mastery over supernatural forces. It's believed to have been compiled in the 17th century, though it draws upon earlier occult tradition and texts. The Lesser Key consists of several sections, or books, each focusing on a different aspect of magic and summoning. The most well-known is the Ars Goetia, which represents descriptions and instructions for evoking 72 demons or spirits, each with its own unique powers and abilities, kind of like Pokemon. These demons are said to be bound by King Solomon and can be summoned and controlled by skilled practitioners. Other sections of the Lesser Key of Solomon includes fan favorites like the Ars Theurgia Goetia, Ars Paulina, Ars Almadel, and Ars Notoria. These sections delve into topics such as angelic invocations, the use of talismans and amulets, and rituals for obtaining divine knowledge and wisdom. Now, the grimoire has had a profound influence on various occult and magical traditions, including ceremonial magic, demonology, and the practice of spirit conjuration. It's been studied and referenced by countless practitioners, scholars, and scary YouTubers throughout history. Now, goes without saying, this is a potentially dangerous text. The act of summoning and working with entities described in the grimoire is not for the faint of heart, and really should be saved for those with a bit of spiritual expertise under their wizard hat. In conclusion, significant grimoire, very, very scary. I'm probably going to leave it closed for now. Its influence and legacy have persisted through the centuries, captivating the curiosity of those seeking esoteric knowledge and supernatural power, or those who are just kind of curious about the whole thing.
Number 5 on this list is Shams al-Marif. This book, from my findings, is not inherently evil in its teachings, but is one of those examples of potentially being a bit too much power for one person to possess. It's a 13th century Arabic grimoire written by Ahmed al-Buni. The book attempts to teach its readers how to perform ancient Arabic magic and is very spiritualistic. This book was super influential in Arabic culture and gained a large following. Many good things have come from this book, but also when you have a large amount of people following anything, some take it too far. Wikipedia writes, in contemporary form, the book consists of 2 volumes, Shams al-Marif al-Kubra and Shams al-Marif al-Sugra, the former being the larger of the 2. The first few chapters introduce the reader to magic squares and the combination of numbers and the alphabet that are believed to bring magical effect, which the author insists is the only way to communicate with jinn, angels, and spirits. And that right there is one of the main teachings in this book, the ability to talk to spirits. The amount of scary stories that we've talked about on this channel though, in regards to people trying to communicate with the dead is crazy, and it shows just how often things like this can go wrong. This has obviously happened many a time with this book, and those trying to reach their departed loved one end up contacting a super dangerous demon. I don't think that there's anything morally wrong with contacting the dead, if the dead are okay with it of course, but it seems like doing this always ends up with something bad happening. This grimoire won't curse you just by simply reading it, but if you try and perform some of the rituals it suggests, then it's very likely that you could cause some serious harm to you or those that you love. I recommend just avoiding this book altogether. Number 4 on this list is Devarmi Mystery. Now the book in question here is actually a fictional book, and therefore it would be actually impossible for you to read it anyways, even if you wanted to for some reason. But that being said, it doesn't change the fact that it's definitely cursed and extremely evil. If this book was real, then we would need to get rid of it as soon as possible because it teaches humans how to do some very dangerous things. The book is part of the Lovecraftian universe and made its first appearance in The Secret of the Tomb. The book isn't referenced too much in that story, but it's described in pretty good detail in the story The Black Bargain. In that book, it describes Devarmi Mystery as something that told you how you could compound aconite and belladonna and draw circles of phosphorescent fire on the floor when the stars were right. Something that spoke of melting tallow candles and blending them with corpse fat, whispered of the uses to which animal sacrifices might be put. It spoke of meetings that could be arranged with various parties most people don't even believe in, with cold, deliberate directions for traffic with ancient evil. Drawing circles of fire, sacrificing animals, talking with ancient evil, this all sounds like pretty bad news to me. Especially the part that says you can arrange meetings with various parties. It's clear that not only can this book teach someone how to perform any number of spells and incantations, but some of those spells will deal with the summoning of ancient demons and creatures. And if we assume that this book is real and can be read, then that would also mean that the terrifyingly powerful gods Lovecraft wrote about would also be real. Meaning that this book could grant you the ability to summon Cthulhu or something even worse. Summoning your standard demon is already bad enough, but an all-knowing, super powerful god definitely raises the stakes a little bit. This book, from every description I can read about, sounds like something that's just far too dangerous for any human to use and wield safely. If it ever was real and you did happen to stumble upon it, best to avoid reading it at all costs. Number 3 on this list is the Book of Abramelin. Abraham was an Egyptian mage who lived between 1362 and 1458 and dedicated his life to magic. Once Abraham visited Egypt, and there he met a magician, not that magician which you see on TV shows, but that who really knows dark magic and dark secrets. He told Abraham many dark and mysterious secrets and strange things which you and I can never imagine. He told him how to live the dead person, the location of under-earth treasures, how to contact devils. Besides this, he also told him the secrets of becoming invisible and flying in the sky. That last passage that I just read was written by Sharik Kamal while he was listing the most cursed books of all time. This book is known to be dangerous, and it isn't just because of the contents in it either. Yes, summoning the dead and performing dark magic in its own right is very dangerous and has the potential to cause serious problems for you and those around you. This book, though, may just be inherently cursed to begin with. Many people have read this book, even those who don't go on to perform any of the rituals or incantations that the book describes, have gotten horribly bad luck afterwards. Like the second they opened up the book and started reading, their entire life just flipped on its side. Some have said that afterwards their home became haunted by some dark spirit and they had to move. It's almost as if the book itself is a portal to another demonic dimension, and just the action of opening it could cause something to leak out. I'm sure that Abraham was a great writer, but no book is worth dying over, so I won't be reading this one anytime soon. Number 2 on this list is The Great Omar. This book is believed to be the cause of one of the most tragic disasters in all of human history, sinking the unsinkable ship, the Titanic. No, you don't catch Leonardo DiCaprio reading this book in the 1997 movie version, but maybe he should have. This book, even though it is deeply cursed, is potentially the most ornate and beautiful books to have ever been created. In fact, it took over 2,500 hours to create this book, which translates to over 100 full days. One would think that a book of this kind would fetch quite the pretty penny, but that actually wasn't the case. In fact, the man who binded this book, Francis Sangorski, had an extremely hard time trying to sell it to anyone. Finally, he did find a home for it in America and was in the process of sending it over there, but it never reached its destination though, because it was on the Titanic. Now, the reason that people think this book had something to do with the unsinkable ship sinking is because only a week or so after the ship had gone down, so did Sangorski. He died by drowning to death a very short time after the book had also sunk to the bottom of the ocean. This is why people believe that something about this book will curse those around it and potentially lead to someone drowning. I personally think it's a bit of a stretch to just assume that having this book caused the entire Titanic to sink. However, it is a remarkable coincidence what happened to Sangorski. It probably won't ever happen, but if this book ever did wash ashore one day, I wouldn't want to be the one to pick it up first. Number 1 on this list is the Book of Soiga. The Book of Soiga is one of the most complete collections of magic and dark magic that one could come across. Wikipedia writes, amongst the incantations and instructions on magic, astrology, demonology, lists of conjunctions, lunar mansions, and names of genealogies of angels, the book contains 36 large squares of letters which Dee was unable to decipher. Otherwise unknown medieval magical treaties are cited, including works known as the Liber E, Liber Os, Liber Dignus, Liber Sipil, and Liber Munob. So we'll get to those letters in a second because those play into the cursed nature of this book, but even without those, we're still dealing with a book that goes into depth on some pretty dangerous topics. The one that jumps off the page to me as being potentially problematic is demonology, the study of demons and the hierarchy to them, and also the study of how to potentially summon them. This is certainly problematic and already a reason to not read this book, but let's get back to those letters. In 1608, there lived a man named John Dee. John Dee was fascinated with this book and wanted to figure out how to decode the letters. He reached out to the angel Uriel, and Uriel told him that only the worthy one will be able to crack the code. Truly a chosen one scenario where the book will reveal its secrets to the one that it decides. John Dee tried to decode it anyways, but then a grim fate befell him and he died. Then, very mysteriously, the book disappeared from the face of the earth for almost 400 years, until it all of a sudden reappeared in 1994. Now, it's thought that trying to decode these letters could prove fatal if you aren't the one worthy to do so. There's over 7 billion people on the planet, so the odds that you're the one worthy one and won't die are pretty slim. Not the sort of odds that I'd want to take just to look at some strange medieval letter. Number 5 on this list is the Treatise of the Vessels. The year is 1981. Harrison Ford has already taken the big screen a few times, but is he a leading actor? Yes, Raiders of the Lost Ark takes to the screen, and the beautiful George Lucas and Steven Spielberg brainchild officially solidifies Harrison Ford as being an elite A-lister in Hollywood. Well, this beautiful brainchild of theirs didn't just come out of thin air, but it was very likely inspired by the Treatise of the Vessels. This text is said to talk about some priceless treasures from King Solomon along with the Ark of the Covenant. If found, these would be some of the most valuable things ever rediscovered in all of human history. When there's gold, people are going to come, and the same thing applies here. There are riches galore to be found if someone is able to get to the bottom of this mystery, and the secrets may be within the Treatise of the Vessels. The thing is, it doesn't tell you the exact location of the Ark, so our daring explorers will need to find out for themselves. In case you didn't know, the Ark of the Covenant is said to hold tablets containing the 10 Commandments. The rest of the treasure is described in the treatise as being 77 tables of gold, and their gold was from the walls of the Garden of Eden that was revealed to Solomon, and they radiated like the radiance of the sun and moon, which radiate at the height of the world. So yeah, it's all pretty freaking good stuff. Although, I don't know if y'all remember the end of Harrison Ford's massive breakout movie, but discovering the Ark of the Covenant may not be the best thing ever. In fact, it's said that touching the Ark of the Covenant will result in death by the hands of God. That's why some people think this whole thing is cursed. Yes, if you actually found this thing, then you might be the most wealthy person in the world, but it may also kill you in the process. You also may never find it at all and dedicate your life to nothing. I'd say that you can probably read this thing, just leave the exploring to our main man Indy. Number 4 on this list is the Voynich manuscript. The Voynich manuscript is definitely an interesting one, largely because no one has any idea what it's saying. This is a 250-page book where pretty much all of the words are in an unfamiliar language that we can't seem to decipher. The reason that people think this thing is inherently cursed isn't just because of the gibberish though, it's because of the pictures that go along with said gibberish. Cosmological symbols, weird plants doing weird things, and nude women doing some other weird things are all over this book. It should also be stated that the manner of the drawings are just plain creepy. Like, there's nothing inherently evil or cursed about a plant or a naked woman, but the way that the book has drawn them out really does give me some serious devil vibes. Because of this, people worry that the book may be cursed. That potentially this is a book from the underworld which somehow made its way to our world. This is why we can't understand the words, but a demon would be able to pick it up no problem. Experts have researched the language, and although they don't know what it is, have discovered some hallmarks that indicate it is a real language of some kind. Therefore, it could be some kind of demonic tongue that we aren't familiar with. Granted, it could also be some other ancient language that's just been lost in time. Demonic language or ancient language, I think based on the drawings, it's clear that whatever is said is probably not PG stuff. Who knows how many gruesome or questionable things this book has been part of in its lifetime. Considering you wouldn't be able to read it anyways, I'd just avoid it altogether. Number 3 on this list is the Handbook of Ritual Power. Anything called the Handbook of Ritual Power probably deserves to be on the list. Owen Jarvis details this book nicely by writing, "This 20-page codex dates back around 1,300 years and is written in Coptic. It contains a variety of magical spells and formulas including love spells, spells for curing black jaundice, and instructions on how to perform an exorcism. The text may have been written by a group of Sethians, an ancient Christian sect who held Seth, the third son of Adam and Eve, in high regard." The opening of the text references a mysterious figure named Bactiotha, whose identity is unknown. "I give thanks to you, and I call upon you, the Bactiotha, the Great One who is very untrustworthy, the one who is Lord over the 40 and the 9 kinds of serpents," a translation of the text reads. The researchers who translated and analyzed the text call it a Handbook of Ritual Power. It is now housed at the Museum of Ancient Cultures at Macquarie University in Sydney. The university purchased the codex in 1981 from a Vienna-based antiquities dealer named Michael Fackelman. Where Fackelman got it from is unknown. Spells, formulas, black jaundice, all of this sounds quite a lot like some of the other books that we've looked at in the first 2 parts of this series. A book that probably teaches humans some skills that we simply aren't ready to receive. A book that, if it fell into the wrong hands, somebody with evil intentions, could prove to be really bad. There are things that need to be left in the hands of higher beings, and making somebody fall in love with someone else may just be one of them. Keep this book locked up and away from prying eyes. Number 2 on this list is the Dresden Codex. Owen Jarvis details once again the Dresden Codex beautifully by writing, "The Dresden Codex is a Mayan text dating back around 800 years. It contains 39 beautifully illustrated sheets with texts and images on both sides. Research published in 2016 in the Journal of Astronomy and Culture indicates that the codex records the phases of the planet Venus so that the Maya would be certain that their ceremonial events were being held on the correct day. The Maya had a really elaborate ritual set of events that were tied to the calendar. Study researcher Geraldo Aldana, a science historian at the University of California, Santa Barbara, told Live Science. They were probably doing large-scale ritual activities connected to the different phases of Venus. Now, for those who don't know, Venus, albeit a very beautiful planet, is often tied to Lucifer. It should also be noted that the Mayans were known to perform the occasional human sacrifice, and I don't think it's a stretch to say that this text most likely contains dates when human sacrifices are to be performed. The Dresden Codex would have acted as an agenda to make sure that our Mayans kept on track with their sacrificial rituals to honor Venus. For this reason, it's thought that this codex is cursed with the souls of those who were sacrificed. It's also very dangerous to perform any of these rituals, as they will likely involve the loss of human life and potentially reaching out to some very dangerous gods. This is the oldest surviving Maya book, and for that reason needs to be kept around for research, but I wouldn't recommend the average person giving it a read. And finally, number 1 on this list is Liber Lineatus. This text is currently considered to be the longest lasting Etruscan text in all of history. It dates back to the 3rd century BCE, and because not much is known about the Etruscan language, it remains mostly untranslated. However, experts who study such things have been able to decipher some of it and have discovered that the text was a ritual calendar, a collection of dates with specific rituals to be performed on said dates. The exact details of these rituals are unknown, but we assume them to be centered around human sacrifices and things of that nature. This is already enough to fear this book, but what makes it inherently cursed is how the pages were used for several thousand years. Mihailo Beric was a low-ranking Croatian official who, in 1848, decided to leave his position and travel to Egypt. While he was there, he decided to purchase a sarcophagus with a mummy inside. Why someone would want a coffin with a preserved dead body in it is beyond me, but apparently this was pretty cool to own back then. Anyways, he takes this mummy back to his home in Vienna and stands it upright in the corner of one of his rooms. It wasn't until after he died though and his brother donated the mummy to the State Institute of Croatia that somebody realized what the mummy was covered with. The bandages that preserved the mummy were covered in writing. These bandages were the Liber Lineatus and had been used as rags for this mummy for centuries. Now this text is locked in a refrigerated room in the Archaeological Museum of Croatia, and for good reason. Not only is the writing of this text potentially very dangerous, but people believe that the spirit of this dead mummy haunts the rags and that they're cursed. Those that come into contact with them, or God forbid, read them, could have some very tragic events befall them. For this reason, I highly recommend staying away from the Liber Lineatus at all costs. Number 5 on this list is Long Lost Friend. This book is really interesting because even though there are multiple copies around the world, there's only one particular copy that has a serious curse to it. The book itself was written in 1820 by John George Homan and is basically a collection of spells and other folk remedies that would be very useful if you were running a farm. A lot of the content in the book has to do with healing livestock and casting a spell to have better yields come the harvest. One copy of this book, though, was pretty much directly responsible for the murder of its owner. Orrin Gray writes, while the book itself is intended to be benign, containing as it does wonderful and well-tested remedies and arts for men as well for livestock according to its original German title, the tome took on a rather sinister reputation following the so-called Hex Hollow murder committed by John Blymer, John Curry, and Wilbert Hess. The three men broke into the home of their neighbor Nelson Raymer because they said he'd put a curse on them and they were trying to find his copy of the Long Lost Friend and destroy it in order to end their affliction. Unable to do so, they instead killed Raymer and attempted to burn down his house. Raymer's supposed copy of the book never turned up. After this incident had happened, the men sort of came to their senses and it felt to them as if they'd been under a spell and lost their minds for a little while. People have theorized that the single copy of the Long Lost Friend that Nelson Raymer had owned was cursed, and through its curse had basically set this tragic event in motion. location. Similar to the One Ring in Lord of the Rings, after it sabotaged its owner, it went into hiding, and now no one knows where this book went. Hopefully it stays hidden and the curse it holds is never brought to the light again. Number 4 on this list is The Orphan Story. The Orphan Story is one of the few entries on this list where the subject matter isn't too demonic or troubling in nature. It's, as the title would suggest, a story about an orphan who at 14 years old leaves Spain to go on some adventures. The curse with this book seems to be when someone studies it. The story was written by Martin de Leon Cardenas in the early 1600s and since then has racked up the death toll for those who've worked on the book. A Peruvian academic, Belinda Palacios, has said, "I laughed it off, but I was a bit apprehensive at the same time. It's taken a while because the people who've worked on it have died, one from a strange disease, one in a car accident, and another of something else. A book that if you spend extensive time with it will inevitably lead to your death. No one knows where this curse originally started from. Potentially the author had written something into the book where if somebody spends a long time with the work, they'll eventually suffer a grim fate. Or potentially through the years of its publication, the book has had something sinister happen to it that then caused those who worked on it to suffer greatly. I find it very interesting that this curse only seems to apply to those that study or put great effort into the book. From what I've read, those who just simply read the book for pleasure will be fine. That being said, any book that has the potential to curse me with death is something that I'd like to keep off my reading list. Number 3 on this list is Tomino's Hell. Tomino's Hell is one of the most famous works from the Japanese poet Sajo Yaso, but it's famous for all the wrong reasons. It's not actually a book, so I'm leaving the parameters of this video a little bit, but it is a one-page poem that has dire consequences if read aloud. It was initially released in 1919 and started to gain some popularity because those who read it felt very troubled and uneasy when doing so. The poem's subject matter is very disturbing and graphic, and it's understandable why it would make somebody feel uneasy. It's about a child named Tomino who lived amongst abusive parents and decided to write all of her sorrows into a poem. That poem is found by her parents and they respond by locking her up in a cage and not feeding her. Eventually she dies from disease and malnourishment. So the poem itself is pretty bloody depressing to begin with. Throw on the fact that when you read it out loud you actually get cursed, and now we have one of the most dangerous pieces of writing in the world. Tomino's Hell, if you read out the poem in its entirety out loud, is said to curse you forever. The curse ranges in severity and can come in the form of almost anything. Illness, financial ruin, accidents, death of a loved one, or even death of yourself are all in the potential cards for what might happen if you read this poem out loud. One of the most famous instances of this is filmmaker Suji Terayama, who made a movie based on the poem and then shortly died soon afterwards due to illness. There have been countless others who have suffered similar fates after reading this poem as well. I've actually avoided reading the poem even silently while I was doing this entry and just read people's descriptions on it. For your safety and your family's safety, I recommend that you avoid it as well. Number 2 on this list is Codex Gigas. This book is often referred to as the Devil's Bible, and anything that's called that has to make this list. It's one of the strangest books in the world because even though it's only 320 pages in length, it actually weighs roughly 160 pounds. The origin behind this dark book is widely debated, but the most popular legend includes a Buddhist monk. It's said that in the 16th century, a Buddhist monk broke a promise to his master, and as a punishment, he chose to lock himself in a room and have no food or no water. He spent days in that room writing 310 of the current 320 pages in the book. The last 10 he couldn't finish though, and instead of enlisting the help of someone from our world, he decided to get someone else to help. It was the devil. He called to Lucifer himself, and Lucifer answered his call. The monk died, but Lucifer finished the remaining 10 pages and left his devilish mark on the book forever. The book is now locked up in Vatican City for safekeeping, but it's said that somebody stole those last 10 pages written by the devil, and nobody knows where they are now. What's written in those last 10 pages is also a bit of a mystery. The devil could have written horrible spells in there that could result in awful evil sweeping across the land. He may have also put a curse on those last 10 pages, and those who read it will fall victim to whatever curse he decided to leave behind. Who knows how dangerous this book could actually be? Either way, if you ever stumble upon Codex Gigas, I don't recommend giving it a read. Number 1 on this list is the Grand Grimoire. Grimoire. The Grand Grimoire is considered by some to be the most dangerous book on the planet. The exact date this book was written is unknown, with some estimates putting its first publication in the early 1400s, but other experts saying that it was probably written some 500 years after that. The writer of this book is thought to be Antonio del Rabina, who, other than writing this grimoire, pretty much a complete mystery. The Key of Solomon and the Lesser Key of Solomon are often on people's most cursed books list, and much of the teachings in the Grand Grimoire was taken from those original texts. This book, the Grand Grimoire, serves only one evil purpose. It teaches someone how to summon and make a pact with the devil. Wikipedia writes, the work is divided into two books. The first book contains instructions for summoning a demon and for the construction of tools with which to force the demon to do one's bidding. The second book is further divided into two parts, the Sanctum Regnum and Secrets. The Sanctum Regnum contain instructions for making a pact with the demon, allowing one to command the spirit without the tools required in book 1, but at greater risk. Secrets contain simpler spells and rituals one can employ after having performed the ritual in the first book. Some editions contain a short text between those two parts dealing with necromancy. The book describes several demons as well as the rituals to summon them in order to make a pact with them. It also details several spells for winning the lottery, talking to spirits, being loved by a girl, or making oneself invisible. This book is made to be an evil cheat code to life, something that somebody can use to hack the game and get a leg up at everything. And don't get me wrong, winning the lottery would be a pretty cool superpower to have, but at what cost? How much of my soul am I gonna have to sell to a demon to get that done? How do I know that I'm gonna perform these spells properly? Like, if I'm an amateur, then I could very easily screw something up and fatally injure myself in the process. Also, summoning the devil is never the best idea to begin with either. This book is just far too powerful and far too sinister for humans to have access to.
Number 5. The Book of the Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage. The Book of Abramelin, or more formally, the Book of the Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage, is an old Jewish magic text that is thought to date back at some point in the 14th or 15th century. Now, it wasn't the initial publication of this book that gave it its notoriety. Instead, it was when it was 19th and 20th century magicians who were in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which is a British secret society dedicated to the practice, research, and upholding of old occult magic ways. But hush hush, you didn't hear that from me. One of the founders of the Golden Dawn, SLM Mathers, created the first ever English translation of the book in the 1890s, drawing from a previously established 17th century French translation. Now, Mathers' translation quickly became the definite magic text of the 19th century, eventually helping inspire Aleister Crowley to inspire his system of magic, the legendary occultist and fixture of one of the best Ozzy Osbourne songs ever. That solo still goes, man. Now, there's all kinds of spells and magic inside this text. Some real highlights include spells on how to conjure somebody and turn them into a donkey, how to summon a monkey to do your bidding, that sounds great, and how to bring forth spirits to fetch you goods. The big key point in this text, however, is an epic, multi-month spanning ritual that, if performed correctly, will allow the sorcerer to commune with their own guardian angel. The book theorizes that everyone has a guardian angel and that they are another part of their essence, a spiritual other half of yourself. The ritual involves, I don't know how to say this politely. You have to, well, they say you have to get blissfully intimate with your other half. Once the honeymoon period is over, the caster then has to summon up and conquer unredeemed spirits of the infernal regions of hell to conquer them. And then they'll be able to master the spirit domain. That sounds like a lot of irredeemed spirits. I hope my angel might help out a little bit with that. This all sounds very complicated, so all things considered, maybe it's for the best that this one's locked away. Seems like heavy reading, not before bedtime. Number 2, the Voynich Manuscript. The Voynich Manuscript has got to be one of my favorite stories of a mysterious manuscript, like, ever. I guess that's why I put it at number 2. Unlike a lot of entries on this list, it's actually very easy to come across a digital copy of the Voynich Manuscript. It's available to read online. The only trouble is reading it honestly probably won't do you a lick of good, since it's written in a language no one has ever heard of and there's no record of it ever having existed. Yale University has the entire thing up and available online if you're feeling confident enough that you can take a crack at it and feel like banging your head against a brick wall for a few hours. The book is a handwritten, hand-illustrated codex of 240 pages of pure mystery, featuring gorgeous illustrations and typography, and what the book is about is your guess is as good as mine, honestly. Carbon dating suggests that it stems from the 15th century, and analysis of the style of the text and illustrations within suggests that it could have been penned during the Italian Renaissance. But just about every single aspect of this thing is shrouded in mystery. We don't even know what it's truthfully called. The Voynich manuscript is the name it was given after the initial owner, Wilfrid Voynich, purchased it in 1912 and brought it to public attention for the first time. Sorry, not the first owner, I'm sure several other people owned it before him. As such, the language inside the book is occasionally referred to as Voynichese. Now, some pages are missing, lost to time completely, and the pages we do have are just a puzzle. Some are foldable sheets of various sizes, some pages have wondrously drawn diagrams or illustrations showing things like plants, some fictional, some real, and astrological symbols, drawings of people. Over the years, there have been several efforts to try and decode and document the book and figure out just what it is. A prevailing theory, admittedly a boring one, is that it's a guide to botany written in a mysterious script, a forgotten language, an uncrackable code, an incredibly convoluted hoax. Of course, with any good mystery, there are some wild theories. Some say the Voynich manuscript could be written from an extraterrestrial gifted to humanity, or written in demonic script perhaps, or that biblical language that we were mentioning in the book Soygas a few points ago. Like I said, it's available online, so I leave this up to you. If you manage to crack it, let us know down below in the comments. We're all clamoring for it.
Number 5. The Necronomicon. To ease our way into this list, let's begin with a supposedly completely fictional book, created by the famous writer H.P. Lovecraft. Also referred to as the Book of the Dead, the Necronomicon appears in several of Lovecraft's stories where it was supposedly written in the early 1700s by an Arabic man named Abdul al-Hazrad, who was a devotee of the demonic deities Yog-Sothoth and Cthulhu, before he was apparently horribly devoured by an invisible demon in front of a presumably very confused and very terrified crowd. After this, the work was apparently translated and passed down over the years, having versions made in Greek, Latin, and English, while simultaneously being banned by various political and religious figures throughout history. Lovecraft was very sparing with the details about the contents and appearance of the book, believing that the mystery made it more frightening, though sections of it are quoted in his stories, such as the famous couplet appearing in The Nameless City, which goes, "That is not dead which can eternal lie, and with strange aeons even death may die." Over the years, Lovecraft was asked several times if the Necronomicon was in fact a real book, but he would always answer that it was not, and that the idea came to him in a dream. Of course, a number of paranormal enthusiasts believe that this dream was actually a vision given to Lovecraft by the demonic entities, and over the years, many famous libraries who people believe are hiding copies of the book, such as the Vatican Library, often receive requests from eager readers wanting to know the secrets of life and death supposedly enclosed within the pages of the Necronomicon. The Book of the Dead appears in many other works of fiction, with Lovecraft's approval, as he believed that different authors using common allusions helped to build a background of evil verisimilitude. Is the Necronomicon a real book, or is it just a piece of fiction that has managed to take on a life of its own? Well, it depends who you ask. Number 4. The Lesser Key of Solomon. The Lesser Key of Solomon is a grimoire compiled in the 17th century from materials that were already centuries old at the time of the book's original publication. The volume is divided into 5 books, one of which contains instructions on how to grant the practicing magician an eidetic memory and the ability to instantly learn materials. Another of the books teaches the user how to contact angels using a wax tablet and a method known as scrying. 2 of the other books describe the 24 different angels and their relation to the 24 hours in the day, and the 360 spirits of the degrees of the zodiac. However, the Lesser Key's most famous book is known as Ars Goetia, which contains 72 sigils, each representing a different demon, as well as instructions on how to summon the 72 demons, and even how to control them. Before you go searching for a copy at Barnes & Noble, consider the following. The Lesser Key of Solomon is apparently a cursed book, with anyone who owns a copy of it reportedly being subject to constant bad luck, or in some cases, even death. Some owners of the book have reported seeing the pages turning by themselves, and even flying across the room, while hearing whispers and seeing dark shadow people. If this warning has reached you too late, and you have already fallen victim to this horrible curse, the good news is that it can apparently be broken by burning all the pages and disposing of the ashes. No one knows for sure who wrote the Lesser Key of Solomon. Some of course believe that it was written by King Solomon himself as a gift for his son, but others believe that it was actually dictated by some of the 72 demons in order to give themselves a means of crossing over to our world. Whoever actually wrote it, I hope that it was done with the purpose of helping us control the dark forces that are knocking on the door of reality, and not the other way around. Number 3. The Book of Soiga. This 16th century treatise on magic, written in Latin, came into the possession of the former advisor of Queen Elizabeth I and famous mathematician, astrologer, alchemist, and occultist John Dee in the year 1580. The book was filled with spells and instructions on how to summon demons, but most curious of all were the several pages which were covered in more than 40,000 letters, all seemingly distributed at random. John Dee spent 2 years trying to crack the code that would allow him to read the book, but could not. In 1582, his colleague and fellow occultist Edward Kelly offered to perform a seance using a special mirror which would allow the Archangel Uriel to speak through him. They performed the ritual, with Dee recording the dialogue between himself and the angel in his spiritual diaries. Dee began the conversation by asking, "Is my Book of Soiga of any excellency?" The angel replied in Latin that the pages of the book were indeed special and were revealed to Adam by the good angels of God in the Garden of Eden. When asked if he could help them translate the tablets of letters which comprised the final 36 pages of the book, the angel responded that only the Archangel Michael had the power to decipher it. Dee would spend several more years failing to decipher the final pages of the book, while concerned at the rumors that the book was cursed and would bring death to anyone who translated it within 2.5 years. The book eventually went missing and was considered lost to history, with the only references to it being in Dee's various diaries. This changed in 1994, when a John Dee scholar searched the British Library. It had been searched many times before, but all the previous searchers had made the mistake of looking for it under the letter S for Soiga, instead of using the book's alternate title described in one of Dee's diaries, Alderia Sive Soiga Vocor. The scholar found 2 copies of the book using this method. In 2006, a mathematician was able to use a computer to analyze the 46,656 letters of the tables and discover the different keyword that each coded page used. This also revealed that the spelling errors between the 2 books proved that they were both actually copies of an even older text of unknown origin. The author of these texts is still unknown, and though the supposed angel said it was dictated to Adam by angels, the idea of angels in the Garden of Eden teaching Adam how to summon demons seems inconsistent with the established biblical lore. Is this supposedly cursed coded grimoire actually authored by some sinister and malevolent force? And what purpose was the book intended to fill? The more we learn about this book, the more mysterious it seems to get.
Number 5 on this list is the Sworn Book of Honorius. This is an ancient medieval grimoire that was very influential and was apparently written by Honorius of Thebes. I say that word apparently because it's currently unknown whether Honorius of Thebes was actually a real person or a complete myth. If he was real, then he's said to have a deep connection with religion, magic, and the devil. This book, the Sworn Book of Honorius, is said to be the oldest medieval grimoire to date, with some people estimating that it was written back in the 1300s. Even though Honorius of Thebes was said to have written this book, it's said to be a collection of many magicians who attempted to condense the knowledge that they had into 93 chapters. The book covers a wide array of magical topics. This includes having the ability to travel to purgatory, or to potentially save someone from purgatory, or even send them there in the first place. It shows people the rituals necessary to summon a demon and bring them into our real physical world. Then once that demon is there, the book goes on to describe how we can command a demon to do our bidding. It shows people how to send someone to hell or to heaven if that person chooses. It even goes in depth about treasure hunting and the proper methods to finding treasure. This book was supposed to act as a one-stop shop on how to be a full magician. A big warning though, and why you need to pray before reading, is actually written in the book. Let him who would work in a magical art beware that he not be in deadly sin, for if he be, he shall be mad ever after. For the soul by its nature desires to see God in whom it delights, but the impediment of sin frustrates its desire and it cannot see God. He who would work in magical art must be willing in his work and utterly cleansed from all filthiness, for the more he suffers, the more he shall obtain. Basically, if you intend to use this book, then you can expect your soul to to go through some serious suffering. Number 4 on this list is the Dragon Rouge. The Dragon Rouge is an updated version of one of the most haunted texts in history, the Grand Grimoire. Keegan actually covered the Grand Grimoire in one of his previous parts of this series, so I highly recommend you go check out one of those videos if you haven't already. But the Cole's notes are that the Grand Grimoire was a text that described how to make a deal with the devil. It showed the reader how to summon Lucifer and then how to make a pact with him once he is summoned. The Dragon Rouge is a version of this Grand Grimoire that goes further into detail on several demons and how one should summon them. What's interesting about this text is that it inspired the name for a cult group in the 90s called the Dragon Rouge. This cult was founded by Thomas Carlson, a Swedish man, in 1989. Thomas claimed that he had visions growing up as a child and believed to be connected to spirits and God somehow. This cult is based in the left-hand path of magic, which for those who don't know, is considered to be the dark magic and associated with the workings of the devil. Apparently, the Dragon Rouge text is one that is worshipped and used quite often during the proceedings of this cult. If you wanted to, you could actually visit the Dragon Rouge's website and volunteer to join their cult, but based on the writings of the book that they worship, I personally wouldn't recommend it. Number 3 on this list is the Book of Shadows. The name alone, the Book of Shadows, is enough to make someone believe that this text is haunted, but its origins confirm that suspicion even more. Gerald Gardner was a Wiccan living in the 1940s. Now, if you aren't familiar with what a Wiccan is, then it's actually someone who practices the religion of Wicca, which is a modern pagan religion. Gerald Gardner created the Book of Shadows, or was at least the person who brought it to people's attention. He's also known as the father of Wicca and is considered by most to be the one who started this religion. He may not have actually been the one to have written the book though, because he says that he received this ancient text from a secret coven of witches. Owen Davies, an expert on haunted books, says that this book was one of the last of a line of worshippers of an ancient fertility religion, which he and his followers believed had survived centuries of persecution by Christian authorities. This obviously made this text extremely valuable to Gerald, and he used it as a means to gain more of a following for his religion. Inside this book are magical rituals, spells, enchantments, and a variety of instructions for how to perform other sacred summonings. This book is said to be extremely dark in nature and certainly something that you would want to pray before reading. Gerald apparently used many of these spells and rituals through his life as he praised witchcraft. Others who have read this book have reported feeling extremely cold and getting the sensation of being watched. Any book that you apparently receive from a coven of witches has spells on how to worship them, and it's called the Book of Shadows. It certainly can't be any good.
Number 5 on this list is the Sacred Book of Abramelin the Mage. This book was written by, and yep, you guys guessed it, Abramelin. Abramelin held a belief that every single person had their own unique personal demon within them. Kinda sounds like the guy who's been through a few rough breakups if you ask me. He believed though that even though we all had this personal demon, that it could be tamed and it could be controlled. Sort of like this inner power that you have that once you're capable of controlling, it will be very, very strong. If you have this inner demon tamed, then you'll be able to perform supernatural feats and abilities that the average human won't be able to do. That's basically what this book is all about. Taming your inner demon and learning to work with it so that you can harness that power. Then, once you've done so, this book will teach you what sort of powers you're able to perform. Now, this all sounds pretty legendary, actually. I think that everybody would love to be able to channel some magical part of themselves and perform supernatural feats. The book, as with many on this list though, comes with a downside. If you have this book in your possession, then you're said to be haunted by spirits from another dimension. And these spirits will bring you horrible luck. Maybe if you channel your inner demon quick enough and then get rid of this book, it could be worth it, but something tells me that it's going to take longer than an afternoon to do that, which probably makes this book too dangerous to use. Number 4 on this list is the Arabetel. The Arabetel, or the Arabetel de Magia Veretum, is an ancient text that has some questionable things in it. Although the intentions of this book are good and it may have helped some individuals live a better life, there are dark things in here as well, and the better life can't be said for all people who use this book. Ancient Origins writes, the Arabetel is a Renaissance period grimoire and one of the most influential works of its kind. Unlike some other occult manuscripts that contain dark magic and malicious spells, the Arabetel contains spiritual advice and guidance on how to live an honest and honorable life. The Arabetel is said to have been written in 1575 AD. The author remains unknown, although it has been speculated that it was written by a man named Jacques Gohori. The focus of the Arabettle is on nature and the natural relationships between humanity and a celestial hierarchy. It centers on the positive relationships between the celestial world and humans, and the interaction between the two of them. The Arabettle was an extremely influential work for its time. So as we can see, this ancient text isn't inherently evil in nature, or at least that wasn't its initial intention. However, this book has been connected to some urban legends, and one copy of the text in particular is definitely cursed. It's believed that back in the 1600s, this book fell into the property of a young Polish farmer. The farmer grew obsessed with this book and the dark and malicious spells that it contained. He cursed his rivals and made it so that their crops would never grow. He turned into this evil warlock who the whole region feared. Even though they feared him, they weren't going to give up all hope. The people rose up and attacked this warlock farmer. They killed him, but before he died, he cursed his copy of the Arabettle so that whoever reads it will die within 60 days. Needless to say, the people weren't about to test this guy's curse out, and they hid the copy of the book away. Nowadays, nobody knows where it went, and it could still possibly be out there. So if you do ever pick up one of these texts and give it a read, then you're basically rolling the dice and just hoping that it wasn't that same copy that got cursed. And finally, number 1 on this list is the Codex Gigas. Codex Gigas is one of the closest things that we have to a Bible for the devil. And anything that carries a weight to it like that needs to be on this list. The Style Inspiration says, at 92 centimeters, the Codex Gigas is the largest extant medieval illuminated manuscript in the world. Just like everything evil, it comes with 2 names, and the Codex Gigas' second name is more than a little foreboding: the Devil's Bible. The history of the book is heavy to say the least. It was written by a monk who had broken his spiritual vows, and for his crime, the monk was sentenced to die entombed behind a brick wall. The night before his death, the monk began chronicling everything he knew about the human experience in a book. So, the story goes, realizing he wouldn't have time to finish it, he apparently summoned Lucifer and asked him to complete the project in exchange for his soul. The book was then allegedly completed by the devil himself. It's overflowing with dark rituals and imagery, and even includes 19-inch drawings of the devil and other demonic entities. Now, obviously, because this was written by the devil, there are some side effects from reading the thing. People have reported watching their friends become possessed as they read it. Now, it's currently on display for people to go take a look at the National Library of Sweden. But be very careful if you ever do go take a look, because clearly, this is the work of the devil.
Number 5 on this list is the Untitled Grimoires. The Untitled Grimoires were written by a witch, and really not the type of book that you want to be reading before bedtime. Or actually reading at all for that matter. Digital Trends says, the Untitled Grimoires is a set of 2 handwritten, spiral-bound spell books sold by an online retailer for nearly $14,000 back in 2013. The books were handwritten in the 1960s by Persephone Adrasta Irene, a high priestess of Wicca who supposedly led her own coven. All 250 pages are filled with incantations, spells, enchantments, and details on how to summon spirits and demons. However, there was a serious catch. The seller warned buyers that any non-believers who messed with the books would bring a deadly curse upon themselves, while Persephone herself explicitly tells readers on the first page that proceeding with the book would have serious consequences. She wrote, "To those not of the craft, the reading of this book is forbidden. Proceed no further, or justice will exact a swift and terrible retribution, and you will surely suffer at the hand of the craft." So literally anyone who can't perform dark magic already can't read this book and learn how to perform dark magic without dark magic coming and cursing them. Seems like a kind of a stupid way to get people to join your club, but I guess I'm not familiar with the ongoings of witches. Either way, there is no doubt that this book is deeply cursed. I can't imagine spending 14 grand on this thing unless you literally were already familiar with dark magic yourself, and I guess then you could make use of the book, but that's not me. People who have tried to read this thing have had some horrible tragedies befall them, so I highly do not recommend it. Number 4 on this list is Pseudomarchia Daemonum. Wow, okay, that was an absolute freaking mouthful, so I'm not going to be calling it that anymore, because it's also called the False Hierarchy of Demons, and I'm going to be saying that from here on out. Ancient Origins says, this is a great compendium from the 16th century dictating the names of 69 demons. The list initially appeared as an appendix to a book about demonology and witchcraft by Johann Weyer. The son of a civic service merchant, Johann Weyer was a Dutch doctor and occult practitioner born in the Netherlands in 1515. Well versed in Latin from a young age, Weyer quickly became a student of Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa, a famous magician, theologian, and occultist in Antwerp. It appears that Weyer's fascination with magic began while working under Agrippa, but later escalated after he became a doctor in his own right. He was summoned to a particular fortune teller's court case and thereby asked by the judge for advice on the topic. The court case started his interest in researching the witchcraft way of life, culminating with his decision to attempt to defend those who were accused of practicing. 27 years after this case, when Weyer was 62 years old, he published The False Hierarchy of Demons. This book, as with most that study demons, also talks about how to summon and control these demons. This book also focuses a lot on witchcraft too, something that became a deep obsession for Weyer. Definitely a book that you should avoid, and one that could hold some serious curses. Number 3 on this list is the Ars Notoria. The Ars Notoria is an ancient text which grants the person who studies it a perfect memory. Something that sounds great from the outside, but it isn't as cool as it's cracked up to be. Ancient Origins writes, as part of a larger collection known as the Lesser Keys of Solomon, the Ars Notoria is a book that is said to allow followers a mastery of academia, giving them greater eloquence, a perfect memory, and wisdom. The Ars Notoria is one of 5 books within the Lesser Keys of Solomon, an anonymous text that was compiled from other works in the 17th century and focuses on demonology. The Ars Notoria is the oldest portion of the Lesser of the Keys grimoire, dating back to the 13th century. However, the text contained within are a collection of orations, prayers, and magical words which date back to well before the 1200s. The prayers are in several languages including Hebrew, Greek, and Latin. It was not a book of spells or potions, but a book of prayers and orations that are said to strengthen and focus one's mental powers by beseeching God for intellectual gifts. Among these intellectual gifts is the concept of a perfect memory. Those who practice liberal arts such as arithmetic, geometry, and philosophy are promised a mastery of their subject if they devote themselves to the Ars Notoria. Within, it describes a daily process of visualization, contemplation, and orations intended to enhance the practitioner's focus and memory. So here's the thing, guys, that all sounds well and good and very useful, but I don't think that people understand what a perfect memory actually means. It means that there is literally nothing at any given point that you will ever forget. The license plate of that one car that cut you off, that one passing comment that the cashier said about the milk that you bought, the strange handshake that you had with your friend the other day. Literally nothing at all. You're not going to forget anything. Think about how much noise is going to be going on in your head at one given time if you can't forget anything. This is the curse of this book, and it's why a lot of people who have studied it in depth have lost their minds. If you're going to remember everything in the world, then there also needs to be a way to turn it off every now and again, to finally get some silence in your head. Sometimes forgetting things really is the best thing for us. Number 2 on this list is the Picatrix. The Picatrix is definitely a book that should be avoided, and it's mainly for how freaking grotesque it is. It was initially written in Arabic back in the 11th century, and it's a book that's centered around astrology and magic. It teaches the individuals who study it how to concoct crazy spells and make magical potions. What has thrust it into the limelight, as I mentioned earlier, is how freaking gross it is. The magical potions and the spells in here are just disgusting, and they're honestly plain wrong. Various body parts, various fluid from said body parts, and other weird stuff is regularly called upon in this text. The following is a literal passage from the book on how to make a spell. Take 4 ounces of the blood of a black dog, 2 ounces each of pig's blood and brains, and 1 ounce of donkey brains. Mix all of this together until well blended. When you give this medicine to someone in food or drink, he will hate you. And yeah, duh, if anyone blended up a bunch of brains and then gave it to me to drink, then I would kind of hate them as well. Many people think that this book is cursed based on the horrible spells in it, but it honestly might not be and could just be super weird. Either way, probably best to be avoided. And number 1 on this list is the Voynich manuscript. The Voynich manuscript is an illustrated codex that is handwritten in a writing system or language that no one understands. By using some advanced carbon dating, we can determine that it was made back in the early 15th century. We're pretty sure that based on the style of writing, artwork, and language that's in this book, it was most likely made in Italy. The manuscript contains 240 pages in it, and even though it was discovered a long time ago, no one has any idea what it truly means. This could be a good thing though, because the current prevailing wisdom is that whoever discovered exactly what this book says and means, they're gonna be cursed. Some think that this book has an ancient alien curse that's attached to it, and that it was dumped in Italy hundreds of years ago by said extraterrestrials. Others believe that there were some deep devil worshippers who made this book after finally making contact with the devil. Either way, so far we have no idea what it says, and if things maintain how they've been, we probably won't ever know. Which for a book like the Voynich manuscript, might actually be for the best.